The last echoes of war still haunted the world, though King's Landing had crumbled to ruin, and winter's shadow still lingered across the bitter north. Yet for Jon Snow, neither king nor bastard now, but simply a man exiled from the lands he loved. The world had become a place of uncertain horizons. The ashes of Daenerys Targaryen, scattered on the wind, haunted him more than the memory of her death. And Drogon, her last living child, had vanished across the narrow sea, his great wings carving lonely furrows through storm and cloud. Jon never expected the dragon to return. In truth, he did not know whether he wanted it. But time in the north, among the silent forests, the bleak snows, the empty, howling wastes, had made a new silence inside him, one deeper than grief. And one morning, as pale sunlight bled through the trees, a black shape appeared on the horizon. It was not a storm, nor a raven, but Drogon, vast and terrible, his scales shimmering like night's own blood. Jon had no sword, nor shield, nor any king's crown. He wore the leathers of the Night's Watch, though he no longer kept their vows. The old wolf ghost watched beside him, ears twitching, hackles high. But when Drogon descended, shaking the world with his arrival, the white wolf did not flee. Ghost simply sat, as if daring the dragon to try him. The earth shuddered under Drogon's talons. His eyes, burning red with old grief and new intelligence, met Jon's. There was accusation there, and a promise, but no hate. Drogon's head lowered. Slowly, majestically, until he looked Jon square in the eye. And for a moment, Jon thought he saw the specter of Daenerys within the dragon's gaze, sorrowful and proud. Jon approached, every step heavy with the memory of what had been lost. The silence of the north was replaced by the silence of something greater, awaiting, ancient as the world. The dragon did not recoil or threaten. Instead, as Jon drew near, Drogon gave a sound like a rumble of distant thunder, almost mournful, and bent a knee, lowering his wing as if offering Jon a place between scale and sinew. The white wolf whined low, torn between fear and loyalty. Jon placed his hand upon Drogon's side, feeling the heat beneath the scales, the terrible strength waiting in muscle and bone. Drogon's eye fixed on him, and Jon thought for a heartbeat he saw a world burning, a queen's last dream, and something else, an unspoken question. "Why have you come?" Jon whispered, though he knew the dragon could not answer in words. But Drogon moved, shifting his bulk so that Jon could climb onto his back. It was not a command, nor even an invitation, but an imperative, something as old as Dragonflame, as deep as Valyria's lost gods. Jon looked at Ghost, and Ghost looked back, yellow eyes bright in the snow. "Stay," Jon said, voice breaking, and the wolf obeyed, though it was clear his heart longed to follow. Jon climbed upon Drogon's back, feeling the ridges of scale beneath his gloves. He settled in the hollow where Daenerys once rode, his body tense, his soul raw. With a titanic surge, Drogon leapt into the sky, wings snapping wide, carrying Jon from the north, from the last pieces of his old life, toward the east, toward something ancient and unknown. They flew above the world as only a dragon and his rider could, over the ruined fields of the Riverlands, over the smoking ruins of King's Landing, where crows feasted among the dead. Jon saw the ships of the Ironborn crawling along the sea, saw the shining towers of Braavos, the palaces of Pentos and Volantis, and always east, always onward, the world sliding beneath them, growing stranger and wilder. Jon lost all sense of time in the endless blue. Day, night, blurred together. He ate little, slept when he could, clutching the spines on Drogon's back as the wind bit through him. Sometimes he dreamed of fire, of Daenerys' last look, of dragon's wings blotting out the sun. He did not know what waited for him at journey's end, nor whether he would survive to see it. The sea turned to mountains, and mountains to broken lands. They passed over the ruins of Meereen, where pyramids glittered in the sun, over Valisar and the haunted roads of Mantares, where nothing living stirred. Jon saw fields of black glass, cities swallowed by time and madness, rivers that smoked and burned. Drogon did not falter, always east, until one day, the land itself changed. Below them stretched the smoking sea, where nothing grew and the water stank of rot and magic. Black stone jutted from the waves, carved by the wind into impossible shapes, and Jon saw impossibly ghostly shapes in the mist, the shadows of long-dead dragons, or perhaps the dreams of men gone mad with loss. At last, on the far shore of that cursed sea, rose the bones of Valyria itself. Towers twisted like the horns of some mad beast, their tops sheared off by the doom. Bridges crossed impossible chasms, and the very air shimmered with heat and secrets. Here, fire never died. Here, the world was not as it should be. Drogon circled once, twice, then descended with a scream that set the black crows flying from the ruins. Jon clung tight as the dragon landed atop a shattered tower, his talons digging into stone as old as the world. Heat radiated from beneath, and Jon could feel, through the soles of his boots, the heartbeat of something deep and deadly, Varia's last embers. He slid down from Drogon's back, legs unsteady. The air here tasted of smoke and iron and something else. Something old, like the first breath of a new forged sword. Drogon moved beside him, tail twitching, great head turning to survey the ruins. For a moment Jon stood in silence, feeling the weight of 1,000 lost years pressing in on him. He wandered through the ruins, half in a dream. The stones glistened with a sheen of black glass, and everywhere he looked, the skeletons of dragons sprawled, some small as dogs, others as vast as ships, their bones gleaming white in the ever-present ash. Statues of forgotten kings glowered from broken plinths, their faces lost to time. And beneath it all, Jon felt the pulse of fire, slow and steady, a heartbeat that had not yet died. He did not know how long he wandered. Time had no meaning here. Drogon stalked behind him, his wings folded, his gaze ever watchful. Jon found a courtyard, its flagstones scorched and broken, and there in the center, a fountain still steamed, its waters bubbling with unnatural heat. He knelt, cupping his hands, drinking the bitter metallic water. As he drank, visions flickered at the edge of his mind. Dragons flying above a city of fire and gold, kings crowned in shadow, men and women singing songs in a tongue Jon had never known, yet somehow understood. The visions grew stronger. Jon saw a boy, himself, but not himself, standing before a council of lords, their faces masked in silver and red. He saw a crown forged of dragonbone placed upon his head. He saw himself astride a dragon, soaring above Valyria as it was, not as it is. Beautiful, terrible, eternal. He gasped, breaking the vision. Drogon rumbled, nudging him with his nose. Jon looked into the dragon's eyes and saw recognition, perhaps approval. He did not understand, not fully, but he rose, wiping his mouth, and wandered deeper into the city. In the shadow of a ruined temple, Jon found carvings so old they seemed more natural than made by human hands. Dragons wound around the pillars, their scales set with shards of black glass, and above them, a man and a woman stood together, hands outstretched, holding a ball of fire between them. Jon traced the lines with his fingers, feeling a strange warmth, an echo of the old magic. A voice, or something like a voice, whispered in his mind. It was not words, but meaning. You are not the first to come. You will not be the last. Valyria's fire is not yet spent. Jon shivered, but pressed on. He found a stair leading downward, into darkness. Drogon hesitated at the entrance, snorting, eyes wary. Jon descended, each step echoing in the dark, until the light from above faded, and only the faint glow of burning stone lit his way. He reached a chamber, vast and circular, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center, a great pit burned with a cold, unnatural flame, blue and white and gold, flickering but never consuming. Around the pit, words were carved in High Valyrian, a language Jon did not speak, but somehow knew. Esentis Perses, said Drogon. The sword is fire, and the dragon. He knelt beside the flame, feeling its heat on his skin. And from somewhere deep inside, the old words rose. The fire leapt, as if answering a summons. Shadows danced on the walls, and Jon felt something within him shift. Power, cold and bright, filled him. Not the power of kings, but the power of the old world, the world of Dragonlords. He saw, in the flicker of flame, the faces of those who had come before. Aegon the Conqueror, his sisters, the long line of Targaryen kings and queens. He saw Daenerys, her eyes bright with hope and grief, her hand reaching for his. He reached back, and in that moment, the world changed. Drogon roared above, shaking the stones. Jon rose, unsteady, feeling the fire in his veins. He returned to the surface, blinking in the bright, ash-choked air, and found Drogon waiting, wings half unfurled. Jon climbed onto the dragon's back, feeling a new certainty, a new strength. Drogon launched into the sky, circling above the ruined city, and as they rose, Jon saw, impossibly, other shapes moving in the ruins below. Dragons, not dead but sleeping, their scales shimmering in the strange light. Drogon roared, and the world answered. The dragons rose, one by one, spreading their wings, their eyes bright with old intelligence. Jon did not know what magic had been awakened, nor what future waited. But as he soared above Valyria, the wind in his hair, the fire in his blood, he knew one thing. He was no longer a king, nor a bastard, nor a broken man. He was Dragonlord. Valyria waited, its secrets unbroken. And Jon, with Drogon beside him, was ready to learn them. Jinda. Night came quickly in the ruined wilds of old Valyria. But it was not like the night Jon Snow remembered from the north, or even the black silence beyond the wall. Here, the sky was bruised purple and red, the air thick with ash and embers that never quite seemed to settle, glowing faintly, drifting and swirling as if the wind itself remembered dragons. The fires below, old, restless, never dying, shone in cracks and fissures, painting the ruins in an endless, shifting glow. Shadows moved, but it was unclear whether they belonged to living creatures, or to the memory of all that had been lost. Drogon moved restlessly upon the broken high tower, his great body curled, head resting on forepaws, golden eyes always watching. Jon sat beside him, his back to the ancient stone, gazing out over the ragged sprawl of Valyria. The city was endless, ruin upon ruin. Bones of dragons and men scattered together in the ash. Yet in that ruin, there was a strange sort of beauty, a sense of waiting, of secrets ready to break open. Jon's dreams when he slept were fevered. He saw the doom, mountains exploding, fire swallowing the sky, men screaming as their city was undone. He saw the Targaryen ancestors fleeing, their ships cutting through the black water. But most of all, he dreamed of dragons. Hundreds, thousands, great and small, their wings stretching from horizon to horizon, their roars shaking the world. He awoke before dawn, sweating, heart pounding, Drogon's low rumble echoing through the stones. The dragon's presence was both comfort and challenge, a reminder that he was never alone, but also never truly safe. Drogon's blood held the memory of every cruelty, every wonder, every hope and rage of his kind. As dawn seeped through the ashen mist, Jon left the tower and began to explore the ruins. His footsteps echoed on shattered flagstones. Drogon followed, silent as a shadow, his talons clicking, the heat of his breath steaming in the cool morning. They passed through what must once have been a market. The stalls collapsed, the tiled roofs broken, but the bones of dragons and the twisted skeletons of strange beasts lay scattered everywhere. Statues loomed from the shadows, faces eaten away, yet the posture of power and command remained. The further Jon went, the more the ruins seemed to come alive. Strange birds, red as rubies, black as night, flitted among the shattered towers, singing songs with melodies Jon had never heard. Ash lizards with translucent skin scuttled away, unafraid of Drogon, as if they too remembered the time of dragons. In the heart of the city, Jon found a vast amphitheater, half buried by the ravages of centuries. The seats rose in endless rings, and at the center, the ground had cracked wide, a rent in the earth from which heat and light poured. Jon climbed down, drawn by a pull he did not understand. He stood at the edge of the fissure, the air shimmering with fire. Drogon came beside him, lowering his head, sniffing the crack. From deep within, Jon heard the distant, rhythmic thrum of something alive. Something more than fire, older than memory. Jon knelt, placing his palm on the hot stone. A surge of sensation flooded through him. Sorrow, rage, pride. The cries of dragons as they died. The laughter of men who thought themselves gods. The terror of the doom itself. He gasped, tears leaking from his eyes. Drogon pressed his great head beside him, as if sharing the pain. The city whispered. Jon heard words, not in his own tongue, but in the strange musical syllables he had heard in dreams. Es Bantis. Ebrar Bartosi. Good night, sons of fire. Jon drew back. Shaken, he wiped his eyes and looked to Drogon. The dragon's eyes were narrow, unblinking, as if he too felt the ghosts of Valyria pressing close. Jon rose and turned, startled by a movement in the amphitheater above. Figures stood in the shadows. Not men, not quite. They wore cloaks of ash and silver, their faces hidden by masks shaped like dragons' heads, some long and elegant, others brutish, all inlaid with precious stones. Jon's hand went to his belt out of old habit, but he carried no sword. Drogon reared up, wings spreading wide. A soundless warning. The tallest figure descended, moving with a fluid grace, cloak billowing behind. When they spoke, the voice was neither male nor female, but something in between, echoing with the weight of ages. You are not Valyrian, but the blood burns in you. We have watched you come. We have watched your pain. Jon's heart hammered. Who are you? The figure removed the mask. Beneath was a face as pale as bone, eyes so black they seemed endless. The features were beautiful, ageless, and utterly inhuman. We are the remembered, the echoes left behind by Valyria's children. Once, we ruled the world. Now, we are but shade and memory. Yet you, Dragonlord, you have woken us. And Jon felt the truth in their words, like a chill at his back. Why have I come? Not for revenge, not for rule. For something deeper, the fire that remembers itself. The last queen died, but her grief did not. She sent the dragon to seek what was lost. Jon looked at Drogon. The dragon's gaze was fixed on the figure, unafraid. The remembered gestured for Jon to follow, and together they walked through the ruined amphitheater, the other masked figures melting away into shadow. They came to a chamber beneath the stone, its walls inlaid with obsidian and gold. In the center, a long table rested, covered in runes and sigils Jon could almost decipher. Around the table stood chairs shaped like the wings and claws of dragons. This is where it ended, the remembered said. The Council of Lords. Here, the world burned, and here the world waits to be reborn. And so, Jon studied the runes. He saw the sigil of House Targaryen, the three-headed dragon, but also dozens of others. A dragon with wings of fire, a dragon crowned with stars, a dragon with two heads fighting. What does it mean? Jon asked. The remembered touched one of the sigils. It glowed faintly under their hand. Blood, fire, memory. All that was lost can be born again, but not as it was. You are not Valyrian. You are more. You have known love and loss and sacrifice. The old kings ruled with fire and cruelty. Will you rule with something else? Jon shook his head, voice hoarse. I don't want to rule. Neither did Aegon, nor Daenys, nor Balerion before her. But the fire chooses, as the sword chooses its wielder. Drogon pushed through the doorway, filling the chamber with his presence. He stared at the table, then stretched his neck, and pressed his nose to one of the runes. The stone sizzled, the glow growing stronger. For a moment, the room filled with the scent of smoke and wildflowers. The remembered stepped back. He accepts you, and so, The others may awaken. Jon stared, shaking. There are others. In the ruins, in the deep. Some sleep, some dream, some hunger for the world. If you would be Dragonlord, you must face them, not with fire, but with the truth that burns in you. Jon understood then that Valyria's magic was not just the making of dragons or the forging of steel. It was the burning of the self, the acceptance of loss, the embrace of grief, the courage to hope for something new. He left the chamber and returned to the surface, Drogon beside him, the remembered melting into ash and wind. The city felt changed, less haunted, more alive. Jon walked the streets, and now the birds sang louder. The lizards scuttled closer, unafraid. As dusk approached, Jon climbed to the highest tower, the wind fierce, the sky burning with sunset. Drogon leapt onto the parapet beside him. Together, they gazed out over the endless city. From the shadows, movement stirred. Dragons smaller than Drogon but fierce and wild crawled from the ruins, their scales iridescent, their eyes burning with ancient light. They came not as threats, but as kin. Bowing their heads, waiting, Jon laid a hand on Drogon's neck. The fire in him answered the fire in them. He spoke, not in Valyrian, but in his own voice, strong and steady. I am not your king. I am not your god. I am only a man, and I have lost as you have lost. If we are to live again, it will not be by fear or blood, but by the fire we share. Follow if you will. Then, Drogon roared, and the world trembled. The other dragons answered, their voices blending into a song older than the hills, a harmony of grief and hope. Jon closed his eyes. In the roar, he heard Daenerys, her laughter and sorrow, her dream of a better world. He heard the voices of those who had come before, and those who would come after. Night fell at last, but Valyria blazed with new light, the fires of the old world waking in the hearts of dragons and men. The city waited, and Jon, no longer king, no longer exile, but Dragonlord by his own choosing, stood at its heart, the fire within him burning steady, fierce, and true. He spent many days and nights among the ruins, learning their secrets. The remembered visited him, sometimes alone, sometimes in pairs, teaching him the ways of the Dragonlords, the language of fire, the lore of the stones. Jon learned to call the dragons, to soothe them with words and song. He learned the old histories, the stories never written, the secrets whispered only in dreams. He learned that dragons were not beasts to be mastered, but kin to be understood. Each had its own mind, its own soul, its own wounds. Some bore scars from the doom, some from wars, some from loneliness as deep as the sea. Jon learned their names, names lost to the world, names that had not been spoken in centuries. He called them one by one, and they came. Drogon led them, proud and unyielding. But the others followed. Silverwing, whose scales shone like moonlight. Virax, whose eyes were gold as the sun. Meraxes, whose roar shattered stone. They circled above the city, filling the air with the thunder of wings. Jon spent his days in council with the remembered, learning the ways of fire and peace. He listened to the stories of Valyria's fall, the pride that became cruelty, the greed that became madness. He learned that to rule by fire alone was to court destruction, but to rule by memory and mercy was to build something new. He wrote his own history upon the stones. He carved the names of those he loved and lost, Eddard, Robb, Arya, Sansa, Bran, Daenerys, into the black rock, so their memory would live. He spoke to the dragons of the north, of the wall, of the snows and the wild places, and they listened. He thought often of Ghost, of the white wolf waiting in the snow, and sometimes, in his dreams, he saw the wolf running beneath the moon, his howl joining the song of dragons. As the seasons turned, the city changed. Plants pushed through the ash, green shoots curling around dragon bones. Birds nested in the towers, their songs filling the air. The dragons flew further, bringing life where they went. The fires of Valyria, once a curse, became a blessing. One night, as Jon walked the ruins, Drogon lifted his head and growled. Jon turned and saw a ship on the smoking sea, its sails black, its prow shaped like a dragon's head. It came not as a threat, but as a message, a sign that the world beyond Valyria had not forgotten. Jon watched as the ship approached, its crew wary but determined. They bore the banner of House Targaryen, a dragon red on black. Among them was a girl with silver hair and violet eyes, her face familiar yet strange. She bowed before Jon, her voice trembling. "My name is Rhaella. I am the last of the Targaryens. I have come to find the Dragonlord." Jon looked at her, seeing Daenerys in her face, Rhaegar in her eyes. He knelt, taking her hand. "There is no Dragonlord," he said. "There are only those who remember and those who hope." Rhaella rose, eyes shining. She looked at Drogon, who lowered his head in recognition. Jon welcomed her into the city, teaching her as he had been taught, showing her the dragons, the secrets, the hopes of the new Valyria. Together, they rebuilt, not as rulers, but as keepers of memory. The world beyond sent others, men and women seeking the old power, some hungry for conquest, others longing for belonging. Jon met them all, judging not by blood or birth, but by the fire in their hearts. Valyria became a haven, a place of dragons and dreams, a city of second chances. The doom was remembered, but no longer feared. The fire burned, but it warmed. It healed. Jon grew older, his hair silvering, his face lined by time and sorrow, but the fire never left him. Drogon remained his shadow, his brother, his hope. And when the time came for Jon to leave the world, he stood atop the highest tower, Drogon beside him, the city alive below. He watched the dragons soar, watched Rhaella lead her people, watched the fires burn, not to destroy, but to light the darkness. He closed his eyes, and in the last heartbeat, he heard the voices of the past and future, the roar of dragons, the laughter of those he loved. He became fire, became memory, became hope. Valyria endured, and in its heart, the Dragonlord's spirit lived on as long as the fire burned. Oh, Kai. Time in old Valyria unspooled like a silken thread, impossible to count and impossible to escape. The world beyond the smoking sea forgot its wounds slowly, but Valyria's wounds, scars scored deep into the very stone, bulled and healed and bled again under Jon's gaze. The air remained thick with memory and mourning, yet new voices joined the chorus. Each dawn more dragons gathered in the ruins, and each dusk, their wings darkened the sky, painting fresh shadows on the bones of empire. Jon Snow rose before the dawn, the tang of ash sharp in his lungs. He traced the familiar path along the shattered city's high causeways, boots crunching glassy slag and broken tile. Drogon circled overhead, his shadow gliding like a promise, sometimes a threat, sometimes a benediction. At Jon's side, Rhaella Targaryen walked. Learning the city as he did, the two walked not as ruler and subject, but as students before a teacher too old and proud to ever speak aloud. On this morning the city felt different. A strange hush hung over the ruins, as if the ghosts themselves paused their endless wandering. Jon led Rhaella down into the blackened vaults beneath a toppled palace where once, the books said, the Dragonlords had kept their eggs and their secrets. The vault's doors hung half off their hinges, iron twisted by ancient heat. Beyond lay a chamber vast as a cathedral, walls lined with alcoves, and muraled with the spiral sigils of 100 vanished houses. The murals shimmered faintly with the last dust of magic, blue and gold as the veins in old marble. Jon stepped forward, his torchlight rippling across glass and stone, and Rhaella drew a breath. Within the chamber, eggs lay nested in beds of ash and chainmail, some broken and some whole. Dragons, newly hatched and half wild, hissed from their perches above. Drogon, never content to be one among many, descended and took his place atop a massive slab of black stone, snorting as if to declare himself lord of all. Rhaella whispered, "They're hatching still." Jon nodded, voice low. Not all the fires went out. He set his torch into a wrought iron cradle and crouched before a clutch of smaller eggs, the shells opalescent and pitted. Memory flickered in his mind. A vision from the pit. The words of the remembered echoing, not with fire, but with truth. He reached out, brushing a fingertip across the nearest egg. Heat flared under his touch, not burning but alive. A pulse that answered his own heartbeat. One of the hatchlings, a slip of silver and blue, no bigger than a hound, fluttered down and peered at him, unafraid. Rhaella crouched beside him, her hand trembling as she mimicked his gesture. The hatchling sniffed her palm, then pressed its scaled head against her knuckles. "They know you," Jon said. "They know who you are." Rhaella smiled, fierce and fragile at once. "Not yet, but I will learn." Nendanir. Jon rose, heart aching with a strange hope, and looked out across the eggs. For a moment he imagined Daenerys' laughter echoing from the walls, felt her presence as sharp and real as the dragon fire in his veins. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, until the ache ebbed and the moment faded. They left the vault as the sun crested the ruins, painting the city in blood and gold. Drogon burst into the sky, his roar rolling across the city, and the young dragons followed, a flock of shadows against the morning. Jon and Rhaella climbed a winding stair to the highest surviving tower, where the wind smelled of salt and the distant sea. From here, the world seemed endless. To the west, the smoking sea smoldered, empty save for a handful of ships, traders and scavengers, always daring, always hungry for what Valyria might yet yield. To the east, the mountains glowed red, their summits crowned with fire. And everywhere, life returned. Green vines curling through broken marble, birds nesting in ruined minarets, dragonkind reborn among the bones of empire. Yet peace, Jon knew, was a fragile thing. The city's power could not long remain hidden. Word of Valyria's rebirth trickled outward, first as rumor, then as song, then as threat. The free cities sent envoys, grave men in rich silks, faces masked with courtesy and fear, bringing gifts and questions, and sometimes spies. One such envoy, a Lysini with eyes like chipped sapphire, stood before Jon in the shattered throne room, Rhaella at his side. He bowed, the gesture deep but cold. "Dragonlord," he began. "The world is not as it was. The Triarchs of Atlantis, the Sea Lord of Bravos, the merchant princes of Pentos, they all watch with interest. Some say you are building an army. Some say you seek vengeance." "Then?" Jon's voice was calm, quiet. "Tell them I seek neither. But the dragons are not for conquest. They are for life." The envoy's lips curled, a hint of mockery. "Life is a dangerous thing in Valyria. Fire always escapes its bonds." Jon said nothing, but Drogon, lurking in the shadows above, uncoiled and let a plume of smoke curl from his nostrils. The Lyseni flinched, sweat beading on his brow. "We will watch," he said, voice faltering. "We will hope for peace. But if you march—" "I will not march," Jon said, "unless the world brings war to me." The envoy departed, and Jon felt the old tension coil in his chest. He knew the world. He knew men. Where there was power, there would be envy, and where there was envy, there would be blood. Rhaella touched his arm. "They will never trust us." "Perhaps they shouldn't," Jon said, "but we can show them something new." She smiled, that quick Targaryen brightness, and for a moment he saw not Daenerys, but all her ancestors, all the hope and fire and folly that had made and ruined empires. The weeks rolled on. Jon and Rhaella worked together, teaching those who arrived. Some refugees, some mages, some lost souls seeking the old world's light. They made the city livable again, hall by hall, street by street. Jon learned the tongues of the East, traded with the bravest merchants, and watched as Valyria's legends rekindled in the eyes of men and women who never thought to see dragons soar. With the dragon's return came new order. Jon and Rhaella trained the bravest to walk among them, to learn their language of smoke and roar. Some died, burned or bitten or dashed against the stones, but more survived, their hearts blazing with new purpose. The city's chaos became, slowly, something close to peace. Yet Jon could not escape the past. At night, he dreamed of Westeros, of the cold halls of Winterfell, of Ghost's white shadow in the snow, of Sansa's laughter, Arya's wild eyes. He dreamed of Daenerys most of all, her hand in his, her voice echoing in the halls of memory. He woke one midnight to find Rhaella standing at the tower's edge, her hair silvered by moonlight. Below, the dragons slept, curled around the bones of their forebears. She did not turn. I dreamed of my mother. She rode a dragon made of shadow, and the world burned behind her. Jon joined her, watching the waves crash against the city's base. Dreams do not always come true. No, but they show us what might be. She turned, eyes shining. If we open our gates, if we let the world in, will we burn too? He met her gaze, the question old as fire itself. Maybe. But to hide is to die slowly. To share is to risk everything. That's what it means to live. Rhaella nodded, her resolve sharpening. Then let them come. Let them see. So the city opened its gates. The ships came, Braavosi, Pentoshi, even a few wary Westerosi. Their banners faded, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. Some sought knowledge, some fortune, some vengeance. Jon met them all, not as a king, but as a man willing to listen. He built a council, made of new blood and old. Rhaella as his equal, a Braavosi magister who claimed descent from lost Valyria, a blacksmith from Qohor, a healer from Volantis, a freed slave from Meereen. Together they rebuilt the laws, forging justice from the ashes of pride. The dragons kept the peace, but not through terror. They soared above the city, reminders of the fire that united all who lived beneath their wings. Each clutch of eggs, each new hatchling was a promise that Valyria could be more than the shadow of what it was. One spring morning, a raven arrived from Westeros. Its message was simple, the handwriting familiar, the words bare and true. To Jon Snow, from Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Queen in the North. Word has reached us of dragons in the east, of a city reborn. Are you well? Are you whole? Write to me, brother. Winterfell remembers. Jon read the letter in the council chamber, hands trembling. Rhaella watched, her expression gentle. You should answer, she said. He nodded, feeling the North's pull, a longing that never faded, only quieted. He wrote, his words slow, careful. To Sansa Stark, Queen in the North. I am well, and changed. The world here is not as it was. Dragons live again, and men remember what was lost. I wish you peace, and hope you will visit when you can. Tell Arya I remember her lessons. Your brother, Jon. He sent the raven, and for days after, he felt lighter, as if the last threads of exile had loosened their grip. The months slipped by, and with them, the city grew. Children played in the old forums, their laughter echoing where once only ghosts had dwelled. New songs spread across the smoking sea, songs of dragons, of fire, of peace. But always, at the world's edge, darkness gathered. Jon heard whispers of slavers in Astapor, arming for war, of the Iron Bank coveting the city's riches, of warlords in the disputed lands marshalling armies. Power, even gentle power, could not go unchallenged. One evening, as the council met beneath the shadow of the high tower, a scout burst in, ragged, eyes wild. Ships, he gasped. Hundreds. Dot. Flying the colors of Lys and Astapor. They come for Valyria. Then no. Jon felt the old chill return. He rose, meeting the eyes of his council. We will not flee, he said. Rhaella's voice was steady. Nor will we burn the world to save ourselves. The Braavosi magister bowed his head. We have the dragons. Jon looked to Drogon, who waited at the chamber's far end, eyes burning with the memory of war. Fire alone will not save us. If we are to be more than what we were, we must fight with more than fear. They prepared as best they could. The city's people gathered, readying for siege. The dragons soared, watching the horizon. Jon walked among his people, Rhaella at his side, their presence a promise of courage. On the morning the ships appeared, the sun was red as blood. The fleets gathered just beyond the city's reach, their sails blotting out the dawn. Banners fluttered, weapons gleamed, and the sound of drums rolled across the water. Jon climbed to the high tower, his heart pounding. Drogon awaited, and Jon mounted, feeling the dragon's strength steady him. Rhaella mounted Silverwing, her first flight into battle. The city waited, breath held. Jon rose into the sky, Drogon roaring, the other dragons joining. A storm of wings, of flame, of hope. He did not speak. He did not threaten. He circled the fleets, letting the dragon's presence speak for itself. The ships faltered, oars stilled. Men gaped upward, some falling to their knees in prayer or terror. Jon flew low, close enough that the sailors saw him. Saw not a conqueror, but a man, tired and determined, not seeking glory but survival. He guided Drogon to land on the lead ship, the deck shuddering under the dragon's weight. The Lyseni admiral, white-faced, awaited him, sword in trembling hand. Jon dismounted, hands open. "You come for war, but there is another way." The admiral spat. "We come for power. Valyria belongs to the world, not to you." Jon shook his head. "Valyria belongs to no one, but all may share in its fire, if they come in peace." The admiral raised his sword, a last act of desperation. Drogon's eyes blazed, but Jon raised a hand, stopping the dragon's fury. "You could burn us all," the admiral said. Jon's voice was soft, but unyielding. "I could, but I won't. Leave and tell the world what you saw, a city of dragons, but also of peace." For a moment, the air was tight with possibility. Violence, hope, fear tangled together. The admiral stared, then lowered his sword. The fleets withdrew. The city exhaled. That night, the city rejoiced. No great battle, no burning. Only the promise of another day. Jon walked the streets, Rhaella at his side, Drogon watching from above. "We did it," Rhaella said, hope bright in her eyes. Jon nodded. "For now, but the world will watch. Let them watch. Let them learn." The city slept, and in its dreams, dragons soared, and a new world kindled from the ashes. In time, the free cities sent not armies, but envoys. Braavos sent a ship, its hull shining, bearing gifts of peace. The Iron Bank came not for debt, but for trade. Pentos sent artists, Lys poets, Volantis scholars. Valyria became a meeting place, a city not of rulers and ruled, but of dreamers and builders, and those willing to risk everything for the promise of fire. Jon grew older, his hair streaked with silver, his heart full but never at rest. The city thrived, and the dragons multiplied, but the memory of war never faded. He knew that fire was never truly safe, but neither was hope. He watched Rhaella grow into her power, wise, fierce, beloved by dragon and man alike. He knew the time would come to step aside, to let new hands shape the future. On the day he felt the first chill of winter in the wind, Jon climbed the highest tower. Drogon waited, patient and silent. Jon stood, gazing out across the city, at the dragons wheeling, at the smoke rising in peaceful coils, at the world reborn. He whispered Daenerys' name, then ghosts, then every name that mattered. He let the wind carry his words into the firelit dark, and in that moment, knew he was home. Not in the north, not in the halls of old kings, but here, in the heart of the new world had helped forge from ruin and hope. Valyria endured, and in its heart, Jon's fire burned, gentle, fierce, and everlasting. Ka. Rain swept in across the smoking sea, its drops hissing as they met the ever-burning fissures, veiling old Valyria in drifting shrouds of mist. The ruined city's towers, half melted and crowned with dragon gargoyles, vanished into fog and shadow. The world shrank to echoes, footsteps on glass, the distant rush of wings, the faint whisper of high Valyrian drifting from the lips of children at play among the bones. Yet beneath this hush, the city's heart beat on. and the memory of fire and loss burned ever brighter. Jon awoke to the scent of rain and sulfur, the wind rattling the shutters of his high stone chamber. The walls were alive with stories, carved scales, faded frescoes, the scrawl of Valyrian hands now dust. He rose and crossed to the narrow window, brushing aside a curtain of damp wool. From here, the city stretched below him in all its haunted splendor. Dragons lounged atop shattered palaces and sunned themselves on bridges of black stone. Rhaella's silver wings circled the towers in lazy arcs, scattering crows. Jon wrapped himself in a heavy cloak and made his way down the winding stairs. The corridors were alive with voices. A Meereenese girl swept the halls, singing softly. A cohort of Kuhoric smiths argued in their tongue, clutching steel drawn bright from Valyrian forges, their faces smudged with coal. A group of children chased a hatchling up the steps, laughter echoing like the peal of bells. He paused to watch them, his heart aching with hope and sorrow, and then continued on. He found Rhaella in the council chamber, a half-circle of windows gazing out on the fog-drenched sea. She stood beside the great table, her hair braided with silver and blue, a ledger in her hand. A fire burned low in the hearth. Beside it sat Illyrio the Braavosi, red-haired and keen-eyed, and Dana, a healer from Volantis, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "They're gathering on the coast," Rhaella said without preamble, glancing up from the ledger. "Refugees. Some say there's fighting in Slaver's Bay. Others just want shelter." Illyrio shrugged. "We have room, but not endless food. The dragons eat more every day." Diana nodded. "The plague follows the ships. The old cough, the shivers. I can treat it, but I'll need more poppy and vinegar." Jon settled into a chair, feeling the old weight of command settle across his shoulders. "We welcome them. The city will stand or fall by what it offers the world, not what it keeps from it. We'll need the smiths to start another well. Have the Meereenese clear the rubble near the southern cistern. If the dragons must eat more, then we teach the newcomers to fish." "Nay," Rhaella offered a half-smile. "And the ones who come with swords instead of empty hands." Jon looked out into the fog, mind turning. "We treat them no different. Show them something better. Let them choose which master they'll serve, fire or hope." The council broke, each member bustling to their tasks. Rhaella lingered, her gaze thoughtful. "You sound more like a king every day." Jon shook his head, lips quirking. "A king who shovels muck and drags stones." She smiled, voice soft. "The best kind. My father wore a crown, and it killed him. My mother rode dragons and dreamed of peace, but she died for it. You walk among us. That's worth more than any crown." Jon bowed his head, uncertain what answer to give. Outside, thunder rumbled, and a trio of dragons wheeled, playing in the storm. The world, for a moment, seemed in balance. Later, he walked the city's edge, the sea wind biting, the rain easing to a damp mist. He came to the refugee camp, tents and lean-tos built from sails and driftwood. People huddled around smoky fires. He moved quietly, offering what comfort he could, asking questions, listening. A Lyseni merchant pressed a child into his arms. Her parents lost, her eyes wide with the shock of flight. Jon knelt, speaking gently, and she clung to him, silent and fierce. The people called him Dragonlord now, and sometimes even King, but most simply called him Jon. He did not encourage titles. He spoke with hands and eyes, with shared bread and honest promises. Each night, more ships arrived, and each morning, more people found their way into the city's warmth. He sat with the elders, Braavosi, Meereenese, Volantini, learning their griefs and their hopes. He listened to stories of old Valyria, tales that wandered into legend. Of fire mages and sea monsters, of the day the sky fell and the world burned. He listened too for hints of threat. Bandits lurking in the ruins, slavers probing the city's edges, spies from Braavos and Volantis whispering in the alleys. He found comfort with Rhaella. Their friendship grew deeper, forged in shared purpose, tempered by sorrow. Some evenings they walked the battlements in silence, watching the city's lights flicker across the stones, talking of Westeros and dreams and the meaning of home. On a night of heavy rain, Jon was roused from restless sleep by the sound of a horn, deep, rolling, urgent. He pulled on boots and cloak and ran to the wall, heart pounding. In the distance, torches bobbed on the water. More ships, but these sailed without banners, their oars silent. Drogon landed beside him with a crash, eyes blazing. Jon mounted, feeling the old thrill of flight, and soared above the city. The storm lashed at him, wind tearing at his hair, rain blinding. He circled the harbor, peering down. Beneath him, men in dark cloaks scrambled over the rails of 3 ships, swords and axes gleaming. Raiders, slavers, tai. They swarmed toward the shore, hoping to slip in under the cover of storm. Jon wheeled Drogon and Dove. Fire burst from the dragon's jaws, searing the decks. Men screamed, leaping into the sea. 2 ships burst into flame, their masts crumbling. The third tried to run, but Silverwing fell upon it, Rhaella riding high and fierce. Her voice rang out, a battle cry in Old Valyrian, and Silverwing's fire swept the deck clean. Within moments, it was done. The rain hissed on blackened wood, and the few survivors swam for shore, only to find the city's defenders waiting. Jon and Rhaella landed by the docks, the refugees cheering, children dancing. Jon walked among the survivors, speaking not in anger but in warning. There is no profit here, only peace. Go home, or join us. We'll have no more blood. Most chose to join. Those who did not were set adrift, their ships stripped and burned. Word spread quickly. Valyria was not to be taken by force. Its dragons were mighty, but its people stronger. The weeks that followed were busy. The newcomers built new homes, learned new skills. The children tamed hatchlings, the old taught songs and crafts. The city became a place of many tongues, many colors. The council grew, adding voices from among the refugees. Jon spent long hours in the libraries, sifting ancient scrolls, reading the histories of Dragonlords and slaves, tracing the arc of empire and doom. He read of Aegon's dream, of Daenerys the dreamer, of the pride that undid kings. Each night, he wrote his own account, a simple ledger of names, losses, and victories, so that the world might not forget again. He dreamed of Westeros, of Winterfell, the Godswood, Arya's wild laughter, Sansa's cool wisdom. Letters came from the north, bringing news. Peace in the Riverlands, trade blooming in the south, the Starks still strong. He sent ravens in return, inviting them to Valyria, but they did not come. The world beyond the sea still feared the fires of old. As the years passed, Jon grew older. His hair, once black as midnight, silvered at the temples. The scars on his face deepened, but his eyes remained bright. The city, too, changed. New towers rose beside the old gardens bloomed. The dragons grew. Hatchlings matured, their scales gleaming blue, green, and gold in the sun. Rhaella became a leader in her own right, her wisdom growing, her voice respected by all. She rode Silverwing daily, her laughter a promise in the morning air. The two of them, never lovers, always more than friends, became legends, though neither sought it. One day, a strange ship appeared on the horizon, sails black as night, prow shaped like a dire wolf. Jon watched from the towers, heart racing. The ship flew the banner of the north, white direwolf on gray. Jon hurried to the docks as the ship arrived. Down the gangplank strode Sansa Stark, her hair red as autumn leaves, her bearing regal. Behind her came Arya, dressed in leathers, eyes sharp and wild. Bran followed, pale and distant, a young man old before his time. Jon embraced them, laughter and tears mingling. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Sansa smiled, eyes shining. We had to see for ourselves. They say you've built a kingdom of dragons and hope. Arya grinned. I came to ride one. Bran's gaze drifted across the city. There is power here. Old and new. You are a part of it. Jon led them through the city, showing them the gardens, the schools, the forges, the dragon pits. They marveled at the dragons, at the new lives growing from old ruin. At the council, Sansa listened, then spoke. Westeros has peace, but the world beyond hungers. If we join you, trade, knowledge, hope, perhaps we can keep it. Jon nodded, the last of his exile falling away. Together, they forged an alliance, Valyria and the North, East and West. Trade flourished. The children of the two worlds learned together, laughed together, dreamed together. On the day Arya rode her first dragon, a wild, copper-scaled male who chose her with a snarl, the city erupted in joy. Old wounds healed, new bonds were forged. The world began to believe. Jon, in his quiet moments, climbed the highest tower and looked out across the sea. He saw the future there, uncertain, wild, but full of promise. Sometimes at night he felt Daenerys at his shoulder, whispering in the wind, "This is what I dreamed of, Jon. A world reborn." He smiled, watching the dragons soar. Watching Rhaella and Sansa and Arya and Bran, and all the children of the city. He knew at last that he had found his purpose, not as king or Dragonlord, but as a man who remembered and dared to hope. Valyria's fire, once the world's undoing, now lit a path into a brighter age. And in the city's heart, Jon Snow walked, unafraid, neither king nor exile, but simply a man who had chosen life. The rain passed. The sun broke through. The city woke, and dragons sang. And the world, at last, turned toward the dawn. Okay. Summer returned to Valyria in waves of heat, drawing forth green from the ash, brightening the stone, making the dragons restless and wild. The old city, once a tomb of smoke and memory, grew loud with laughter and the hammering of builders. Markets bustled where bones once bleached in sun, and the ruined palaces of Dragonlords were hollowed and repurposed. Children's voices ringing from walls that once held secrets and sorrow. Ships came daily now, drawn by rumor and hope. Banners of Bravos, Volantis, Pentos and Lys, and sometimes banners from as far as Old Town and Dorne, snapping bright against the blue. Jon Snow walked among his people, not a king, not a conqueror, but a man who understood the weight of every stone and every word. At his side, Rhaella Targaryen matched his stride, her hair loose and shining, her smile easy among the citizens and counselors, the mages and smiths, the children and the lost. Peace, always fragile, held by threads of trust and the shadow of wings. That morning, Jon stood on the upper terrace of the old council tower, overlooking the city as the sun rose behind the mountains. The domes and broken arches, the twisted bridges, the newly planted orchards and gardens, the silvered river winding through black ruins, all glowed golden and alive. Below, Silverwing soared, Rhaella's laughter clear and wild, chasing the swiftest of the young dragons. Drogon waited at Jon's side, silent, his vast head rising and falling with every breath. A knock at the door behind him, a gentle rapping, broke his reverie. Arya Stark entered, her hair wind-blown, her eyes as sharp as memory. She moved like a shadow, quiet but never unnoticed, and Jon embraced her, the years between them melting away. "Rhaella's growing bolder," Arya said, nodding to the dragons. "She'll outfly you soon." Jon smiled, brushing ash from his sleeve. "Let her try. She's braver than I ever was." Arya leaned on the stone rail, watching the city come to life. The north is quiet. Sansa's letters are full of talk. New grain stores, new ships, alliances with the Riverlands and Dorne. She says Winterfell's never seen a spring like this. "She leads well," Jon replied softly, thinking of Sansa's careful counsel, the way she weighed every word, every alliance. "She always did." Arya grinned. "She's proud of you. You built a home here, Jon. I see why you stayed." He looked away, uneasy, with praise. "It wasn't just me. The city grows because the people want it to. Because Rhaella gives them hope." Memtau. A silence, companionable. Arya's eyes wandered to the distant ruins, where workers rebuilt the baths, the plazas, the dragon forges. "How long do you think it can last?" she asked. Jon shrugged. "As long as we have peace." As long as we keep faith with each other. Arya studied him, her gaze weighing truth. I met a man last night, a sellsword from Tyrosh. He says there's talk in the free cities, a council, a league, something new. They're afraid of Valyria. They see dragons, and they remember the doom. Jon nodded, face grave. I've heard the same. There are always those who fear what they don't control. Would you fight them? Arya asked, voice low. He watched Silverwing bank and soar, children cheering from the rooftops below. If they come to burn what we've built, yes. But I won't strike first. I won't be the doom they fear. Beshenhamd. Arya placed a hand on his shoulder, strong and certain. You never were. He covered her hand with his own, a silent promise, then turned as footsteps echoed behind them. Rhaella entered, cheeks flushed from flight, eyes sparkling. The hatchlings are flying further every day. One nearly reached the smoking sea before Silverwing caught her. Jon smiled at the joy in her voice. They're restless, like their riders. Rhaella's gaze softened. Perhaps it's time to show the world we have nothing to hide. The council meets today. Come. We'll decide together. They walked together through the halls, Jon, Rhaella, Arya, descending to the council chamber. The room was bright with banners and sunlight, crowded with faces old and new. The Bravosi Magister, the Kahoric Smith, the Volantine Healer, Daena, the freed Marinese, and new counselors from Westeros, Pentos, and even Norvos. Children watched from the galleries, some bold enough to whisper questions as Jon passed. The city's business flowed, disputes over land, the division of water, plans for new docks, new schools, the training of dragon keepers, the restoration of libraries. Rhaella presided with grace, her voice steady, her hand gentle. At last, the matter of the free cities came. Daena read the latest missives, cautious, clipped, full of veiled threat. They request an embassy, she finished. They say it is for trade and understanding, but they seek spies, not friends, muttered the Kahoric. Jon listened as the council debated, some urging caution, some pressing for openness, others fearing trickery. At last he spoke. We have built peace here, he said quietly. But peace is not silence. If the world wishes to see us, let them come and see. We'll welcome their embassy on our terms. No armies, no weapons, no them see children learning, dragons flying, bread broken at our tables. Rhaella nodded. We have nothing to fear from the truth. We'll invite the ambassadors. But if any come with steel in hand, Drogon will remind them who rules Valyria. Laughter, uneasy but real. Arya grinned, eyes flashing. The council dispersed, plans made. That afternoon, Jon and Rhaella rode out to the edge of the city, Arya beside them, Drogon and Silverwing, and Arya's copper-scaled dragon. Ghost flame Baitot. They soared above the river, above the farms and orchards, above the camps of newcomers who knelt, waving and cheering as the dragons passed. They landed by the old bridge, the stones grown slick with moss, the air alive with birdsong and the hum of insects. Jon dismounted, feeling the earth's heat rise beneath his boots, the deep, slow pulse of fire that never truly died. Rhaella crouched by the river, trailing her fingers in the water. Sometimes I wonder if we're dreaming, she said softly. If I'll wake and find it all gone. Dragons, gardens, peace. Jon knelt beside her, gazing into the water. It's real, because we made it so. Because we refused to wake. Arya sat on the far bank, tossing stones. Dreams can turn, Jon, but you've made a place for people to hope. That's more than most ever do. He smiled, not looking up. And you? Will you stay? Benday. She shrugged, but there was affection in her voice. For a time, there's always another road, but this place, it feels like the stories Mother used to tell. The days passed swiftly. The embassies came. First Bravos, then Pentos, Lais, Norvos. Each brought gifts and veiled questions. Each met with hospitality and firm boundaries. The visitors marveled at the dragons, at the schools and gardens, at the laughter of children and the strength of the city's people. One night, as a harvest festival burned bright in the plazas, music feasting, the dragons dancing overhead in great spirals of flame, a Lyseni noble approached John Dayan. She was tall, dark-haired, her eyes quick and calculating. "Dragonlord," she said with a bow. "The world has not seen the like of this in 500 years. Some say you are a king reborn. Others say you are the doom returned." "Now," John smiled, accepting a cup of sweet wine. "We are neither. We are survivors, builders, people who learned that fire can warm as well as burn." She nodded, swirling her wine. "Yet the world fears fire. Can you promise it will never burn them again?" He met her gaze, steady. "I cannot promise what every man will do, but I can promise that if they come in peace, so shall we. And if they come with swords, well, you have seen what dragons can do." She laughed, not quite at ease. "You ask us to trust you." John shrugged. "Trust is all we have. Without it, there's nothing but war and ruin." She studied him, weighing. "Perhaps the world will believe, perhaps not." He watched her drift away into the crowd, thinking of all the banners that had once burned in Valyria, all the swords and crowns and dreams. After the festival, the city slept, but John lay wakeful, haunted by distant thunder and the memory of marching feet. He rose before dawn, climbing to the highest tower, where Drogon watched the world in silence. John sat beside the dragon, his thoughts heavy. He spoke softly, the words for himself alone. "Will it last, old friend? Or is all this just another dream that ends in fire?" Drogon rumbled, tail lashing the stones. John stroked the rough scales, feeling the old warmth, the connection deeper than words. In the quiet, Rhaella found him, silent as the moon. She sat, folding her legs beneath her. "I had a dream," she whispered. "I saw Valyria whole, a city of light and shadow, fire and peace. I saw you, standing at the heart, and dragons circled above." John looked at her, hope mingling with fear. "And then?" She smiled, gentle and fierce. "Then the world turned, and we turned with it. We endured." He closed his eyes, letting the city's heartbeat fill him, the memory of all he had lost and all he had gained. Morning came, bright and full. The markets filled, the dragons flew, the laughter of children rang from the stones. Arya rode out with a hunting party. Rhaella met with teachers and mages. And John walked the city, listening, learning, holding peace with patient hands. Trouble did come in time. A fire in the East Quarter, a squabble over water, a group of Pentoshi merchants caught smuggling blades. John met each challenge with steadiness, his counsel beside him. The dragons watchful but restrained. The city did not fall. News from Westeros arrived. Sansa's rule grew stronger, the north prospered, the summer harvests were rich. Bran sent word from the wall. Strange and spare. Omens, crows, shifting winds. John rode back, sharing what he could, inviting them again to visit. Years passed, and still Valyria endured. Children born in the shadow of dragons grew tall and bold. The old magics lingered, woven into stone and song, and the warmth of fires at night. The world changed slowly, and learned to live with hope. In the end, John grew old in the city he had made his home, his hair gone white, his hands scarred and strong. Rhaella stood beside him, ageless in spirit, her wisdom shining in every counsel, every choice. Arya came and went, wild as ever, her tales lighting the long winters with laughter and awe. Jon's last days were spent among his people, walking the gardens, telling stories to the children, flying once more with Drogon above the river at dawn. He died as he lived, quietly with honor. His last sight the city golden beneath the wings of dragons. They buried him in the heart of Valyria, beneath the tallest tower, where the old stones met the new GUI. Rhaella spoke the words, her voice unbroken, and the dragons circled overhead, their voices a promise to the world. Valyria did not fall. Its fire did not fade. And in every heart that called it home, Jon Snow lived on. A legend not of conquest, but of hope and memory, and the fire that endures. Rains returned in sheets, veiling old Valyria's spires and domes and smoky curtains that blurred the boundaries between present and past. Life and legend. Storms swept up from the south, their thunder cracking overhead as dragons took shelter in the deep halls beneath the city. The air turned heavy and close, fragrant with wet stone, river mist, and the distant, metallic tang of fire smoldering in the bones of the world. In the city, people huddled beneath eaves and awnings, tending their fires, their shops, their children, while in the high tower Jon Snow had called home. Rhaella Targaryen watched the lightning reflect in the river and counted the years that had passed since his coming. Valyria had outlasted every doom laid upon it. The old city had grown new wings, living wings that beat the air above rebuilt plazas, green gardens, and bustling forges. Its people had grown together, children of many lands and many tongues, their lives intertwined like the vines that snaked up the ruined columns. In the markets, the voices of Pentos and Bravos, the North and Lys, mixed freely with the harsh, ancient music of High Valyrian, sung now as a tongue of daily life and not just legend. There were more dragons now than even in the first years after Jon's arrival. Drogon, his great body scarred and wise, watched over the city like an old king. Silverwing, with Rhaella at her side, had laid 3 clutches, each egg cared for as both treasure and promise. The sky was never empty. In the cool of evening, as the rains died and the cloud banks split, hatchlings tumbled over one another in clumsy games, overseen by elders whose roars set even the storm's thunder to shame. In the years after Jon's death, the city changed again. Rhaella ruled, but not alone. The council, now a parliament of many voices, drew its strength from all corners of the known world. Old slaves from Meereen became teachers, Norvoshi priests debated with Westerosi septons, and smiths from Quohor trained apprentices in the secrets of steel and flame. Merchants brought news and goods from as far as Ashai and White Harbor, spices from Yeti, glass from Volantis, wine from the Arbor. Some came for trade, others for learning, some only to stand where dragons soared and feel themselves small in the face of wonder. Rhaella herself grew into legend, though she scorned the trappings of royalty. She rode Silverwing less often, preferring now to walk among the people. Her cloak plain, her boots muddied, her eyes bright with curiosity. The years had lined her face, but had not diminished her strength. She was beloved, not as a queen to be worshipped, but as a mother of the city, stern when needed, gentle always, her justice swift and open-handed. She spoke with smiths, helped with the planting, held counsel in the gardens where children played. One morning when the air was cool and sweet after rain, Rhaella gathered her council in the Hall of Dragons, a broad, low building with columns of pale marble and a roof tiled in green and black. The walls inside bore murals of Jon and Daenerys, of Drogon and Silverwing, of the old city burning and being reborn. Banners of many houses hung beside new standards, a 3-headed dragon, red and silver, beside a direwolf, a kraken, and a sun and spear. The council chamber was alive with talk. Kalira, a Meereenese, tall and iron-voiced, stood at the head of the table, reading the latest reports from the harbormaster. 3 new ships from Lys, 4 from Bravos, 2 from the north, 1 from Volantis. All accounted for, all searched, all carrying trade, grain, copper, pearls, and some refugees. A group from the Summer Isles requests an audience, bringing a delegation of priests and healers. Daena, the Volantine healer, spoke next, her voice measured. The fever spreads more slowly this year. We have poppy, willow bark, and vinegar enough. The dragon's dung fertilizes the gardens. The apothecaries are grateful. There have been no deaths among the children for 3 months. Dan? Yoren, a smith from Quohor, reported on the forges. The northern coal is harder than ours, burns hotter. We've doubled the output of steel. 3 more eggs hatched last night, 1 black, 1 blue, 1 the color of gold. The city's roofers complain the dragons take the best tiles for their nests. Laughter rippled around the table. Even Rhaella smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. Let them have the tiles. Let them feel at home. Jorah, a Northman, his beard going white, gave news from the border. There was a band of slavers near the smoking sea. We drove them off. No one hurt, but they're getting bolder. We need more patrols in the far marshes. Rhaella's gaze darkened. We'll double the watch, and I'll speak with the captains. No slavers will set foot in Valyria. Men shall I. The council turned to debate, voices rising and falling in a dozen languages, all weaving together into the city's daily song. Rhaella listened, adding her own voice, guiding, correcting, always seeking balance. When the meeting ended, she walked the city as she always did, stopping to speak with market women, to watch the dragon keepers at work, to join in a lesson at one of the new schools. The city had grown beyond its walls. Farms dotted the valley, and new villages clung to the riverbanks, their people living in the shadow of wings, but without fear. In the evenings, Rhaella often sat in the high garden, her favorite place since childhood, a circle of old stone, ringed by roses and pomegranates, with a view over the city and the sea. On this night, Arya Stark found her there, returned from her wanderings yet again. Arya was older now, her hair streaked with silver, her face lean and sun-browned, but her eyes held the same bright mischief. You never stop building, Arya said, sitting beside her. Every time I return, the city is bigger, louder, happier. Rhaella smiled, picking a petal from a rose. I do not build alone. The city belongs to everyone who dreams in it. Arya watched the dragons wheeling overhead. I rode north through the marshes, past the wild rivers. There are more people now. Farmers, traders, even some from the Far East. I met a boy who had never seen a dragon, and when Silverwing passed overhead, he wept for joy. That's why we endure, Rhaella said. Not for power or pride, but for the chance to give that wonder to the world. Arya stretched, wincing at a scar on her side. Do you ever fear it could end? The free cities are restless. They fear you, even now. They fear that Valyria will rise again and swallow the world in fire. Rhaella nodded, voice low. Fear is a shadow that never leaves. But I remember what Jon said. Peace is not the absence of fear, but its companion. We live with it, we build anyway. Arya laughed, softer than in her youth. I'll stay a while. There's more to learn here than anywhere else in the world. I've seen dragons in Ashai, ships in Yeti, but nothing like this. They talked long into the night, sharing wine and stories. When Arya left for her own lodgings, Rhaella lingered, listening to the wind in the roses, the distant cries of dragons, the heartbeat of her city. The years unspooled in golden thread and shadow. Children grew tall, new houses rose, trade flourished, and Valyria's council grew in wisdom and reach. Rhaella's hair turned silver white, and she walked with a cane now, though her mind was as sharp as the first summer sword. Once a year, at the Festival of Fire and Harvest, the city celebrated not war or conquest, but memory and hope. The dragons danced above the towers in spirals of flame and smoke, while the people lit lanterns and candles, each flame a wish for peace, a prayer for endurance. Names were spoken aloud. Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, Drogon, Silverwing, and all the old names of Valyria and Westeros. Rhaella stood at the heart of the city, leading the song, her voice sure even as age weighted her bones. On her final night, Rhaella climbed with Arya and Daena to the roof of the council tower. Below, the city glowed with 1,000 fires, the dragons singing overhead, the sea shining under a moonless sky. She looked out at all she had loved and built, and knew it would endure beyond her. My time is ending, she said, her voice soft as the wind. Arya took her hand. Your time is legend. You gave the world back its hope. Rhaella smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. We gave it, all of us. Promise me you'll carry it forward. We will, Daena said, voice certain. We'll remember. Rhaella leaned on the stones, feeling the city's warmth, the power beneath her feet, the memory of dragons soaring. I wish Jon could see this, she whispered. Arya squeezed her hand, and the three watched as dawn touched the towers and the gardens, turning the city to gold. That morning, Rhaella slipped away in her sleep, her hand resting in Arya's, a smile on her lips. The city mourned, but it did not falter. The council guided Valyria with care and courage. The dragons soared, the gardens bloomed, the bells rang out from towers old and new. Arya remained for a time, then wandered on. But she returned each year for the festival, lighting a lantern for her friend, and for the hope they had built together. Generations passed. Stories grew into legends, and legends into myth. Yet always in Valyria, the dragons flew, the people gathered, the fires burned. At the city's heart, beneath the highest tower, the tombs of Jon Snow and Rhaella Targaryen lay side by side, their names carved in many tongues, a promise kept, a hope never lost. Children visited the tombs, touching the stones for luck, listening to the old stories told anew each spring. They grew up believing in the fire that heals, the peace that endures, and the courage to dream beyond the ruins of the world. And so Valyria lived, its heart strong, its fire gentle, its memory bright as the dawn, forever remade by those who chose hope over fear, and built a city where even dragons learned to live in peace. Years became decades, and the rhythm of life in Valyria moved in seasons now, not in terrors and firestorms, but in the ordinary labors of peace. The city that had once been haunted by its own legend was now shaped by the dreams and memories of living men and women, by the calloused hands of builders, by the bright eyes of children, by the quiet wisdom of those who remembered the cost of fire and grief. On summer nights, the streets glowed with lanterns and laughter, music, and the beating of dragon wings overhead, and the stories told in every inn and garden had turned from the dark grandeur of doom and conquest to the steady, hopeful tale of endurance. After the passing of Rhaella, Valyria marked its years by the reign of councils and the bloom of dragons. No king or queen would rise again to rule alone. Instead, the council, dozens strong, drawn from every quarter of the city and every tongue of the known world, led with debate, with compromise, with the patient, sometimes halting steps of people learning to trust each other. Old feuds faded. The children of Norvus and Dorne, of Meereen and the Reach, of the Summer Isles and the North, grew up together, taught by old stories, but not bound by them. In the gardens at the foot of the council tower, Arya Stark, her hair silver now, her stride slowed but not diminished, walked among the rose bushes in the cool of morning. She was older than most remembered, but her eyes still shone with curiosity and mischief. The children followed her, listening to her stories, of wolves and ships, of a world beyond the smoking sea, of friends lost and found again, and of the Dragonlord who had changed the fate of 2 continents without ever wearing a crown. It was a gentle time, but not without challenge. The free cities pressed ever closer, their trade envoys becoming ambassadors, their ambassadors at times spies or even agitators. The rumors never stopped, that Valyria's dragons would one day fly to war again, that a new doom would sweep the world. There were quarrels over trade, sharp debates over borders, and every few years, threats from some new league or confederation on the mainland. Yet the city held together, its peace a stubborn flame. One such threat came in the 47th year of the city's renewal, when a league of lies, Pentos and Myre, long rivals, now united by fear and envy, blockaded the bay and sent envoys demanding tribute. The city's council met, voices rising in alarm. But it was Arya who called for calm. They fear what they do not understand, she told them, her voice dry and low. They remember dragons that burned cities, not dragons that teach children to read. Invite them in. Let them see for themselves, the council argued, but the wisdom of years prevailed. A festival was called. The blockading ships found themselves greeted not with fire, but with gifts, wine, fruit, the art of Valyria's glassworkers and smiths, and invitations for their captains to join the city's feast. When the delegates came ashore, weary and proud, Arya herself greeted them, walking among the dragons with the ease of a woman who had grown old with them. She showed them the schools, the gardens, the the hospitals built with Cahoric steel and Northman wood. She led them to the tombs beneath the council tower, where Jon Snow and Rhaella Targaryen lay beneath stone, their memory honored by all. That night, the dragons danced above the city, spiraling in loops of fire and song, watched by thousands. In the morning, the blockade was gone. Some delegates stayed, sending letters home that spoke of a city strange and wonderful. Not a city of conquest, but a place where the world might begin again. So the years passed in a slow unfolding, and change came in ways both small and great. The children of those first years grew into leaders of their own. Meraxes, the daughter of a Myrinese healer and a Braavosi merchant, rose to lead the council with a gentle hand and a sharp tongue. Kalira's grandson, a boy with hair black as jet and eyes bright as molten gold, became the city's chief dragon keeper, known for his way with even the fiercest of hatchlings. Arya watched them all with quiet pride, sometimes leaving for a season to wander the world, always returning with stories, relics, and new ideas. On the 100th anniversary of Jon Snow's arrival, the city gathered in the great amphitheater. Rebuilt stone by stone, now ringed with gardens and pools, its ancient seats filled with every race and tongue of the world. Dragons perched on pillars, their wings folded in peace. Arya stood before the assembly, the last living soul to remember Jon in life. Her voice was stronger than many expected, clear as the northern winds. "We are not the children of doom," she said. "We are not conquerors or kings. We are a people who lost everything, who built something new with our grief. We do not rule by fire. We live by memory and by hope." The crowd roared, a sound that echoed over the river and out to sea. That night, every house lit candles at its doors. Every family shared stories of old times and new. The dragons flew, but did not burn. As Arya grew old and slow, the city's leadership passed to the next generation. The council continued, changing with each season, drawing strength from its many voices. The city itself grew outward, new villages rising along the coast. Travelers and scholars arriving from all corners of the world. Trade flourished, but more precious than gold were the stories, the tales of dragons and peace, of hope built from ruin. A new school rose on the riverbank, its doors open to all, its halls filled with books and scrolls in every language. The eldest dragons, slow with age, basked on the warm stones nearby, listening to the laughter of children. The youngest learned to write their names in Valyrian and the common tongue, to tend the city's gardens, to care for hatchlings, to speak honestly in the council's debates. Some years were lean, droughts, floods, a fever that swept the lower quarters. Some years were bountiful, the markets bursting with grain and fruit, the rivers full of fish, the air sweet with blossom and spice. Always, the city endured. Old ruins grew new foundations. Old wounds gave way to new dreams. Arya's last winter came softly, and she spent it in the high tower, wrapped in furs and surrounded by children, telling them tales of wolves and dragons, of distant seas and narrow streets. On her last night, she asked to be carried to the tombs, to lay her hand on the stones above Jon and Rhaella. "Tell the city," she whispered, "that the fire endures, that memory is stronger than fear." When she passed, the city wept. The bells rang for 3 days and 3 nights, and every dragon flew once around the council tower in silent tribute. They laid Arya beside Jon and Rhaella, her tomb marked with the sigil of House Stark and the words, "She chose her own road and led others with her." The council decreed that the festival of fire and harvest would be Arya's day as well. A day for stories, for the lighting of candles, for courage and laughter in the face of old shadows. Decades passed, and still the city grew, changed, remembered. The descendants of Jon and Rhaella, adopted kin, foundlings, dreamers from every corner, guided Valyria through each storm and calm. The dragons learned new songs. The people learned to trust their neighbors and themselves. War never vanished from the wider world, but Valyria became a refuge, an idea as much as a place, the city on the smoking sea where the broken might be mended, where the lost could find their names. In distant lands, kings and queens sent envoys to seek Valyria's wisdom, not its fire. Children from Winterfell, from White Harbor, from Old Town Bravos, came to study at the river school, to marvel at dragons, to hear the old tales. Some stayed, building families and memories, shaping the city's future with each new voice, each new hope. And always, in the heart of Valyria, the fire burned, not to destroy, but to light the way. The tombs beneath the council tower never went cold. For each night, someone left a lantern there, a whisper of thanks, a promise kept. So, the city endured, not in splendor, not in conquest, but in the patient, fierce light of a people who remembered, who forgave, who hoped. Dragons soared, the river flowed, gardens bloomed, and the stories grew richer each season. And as long as stories were told beneath dragon wings, the spirit of Jon Snow, of Rhaella, of Arya Stark, and of all those who chose hope over fear, remained unbroken in the living heart of Valyria. Spring returned to old Valyria in a riot of color, as if the land itself had finally cast off the last vestiges of its long sorrow. The ruins, once smothered in ash, were green with ivy and wildflowers, vines curling up the bones of old palaces, fruit trees blossoming where dragonfire had once blackened stone. The city's markets grew crowded, the streets alive with every tongue of Essos and Westeros, and every plaza filled with the mingled laughter of children and the proud roars of dragons. In this season the city felt young again, not despite its past but because of it, a mosaic of memory and hope, loss and rebirth. Beneath the ancient council tower, morning sunlight flooded the new marble halls where the city's council now gathered. 36 voices from every walk of life, each seat hard-won, each vote the result of argument and compromise. The council's seal, a dragon entwined with a rose and a direwolf, a sigil for peace and the new order, hung over the doors, and the hallways beyond thrummed with life. Merchants from Bravos and Corth, Kuhorik smiths, Summer Islanders and children from the north, all mingled, sharing gossip, news, and dreams. At the council's heart, Miraxes of Meereen presided, her eyes as bright and sharp as they had been in her girlhood, her voice calm and strong. She listened as a Bravosi merchant complained about the dock fees, as a young dragon keeper petitioned for more room for the hatchlings, as a Volantine healer called for new wells and baths for the growing city. She weighed every word, her hands folded before her, her thoughts shaped by memories of Arya's wisdom, of Rhaella's patience, of Jon Snow's stubborn refusal to give in to fear. As Miraxes gave her judgment, outside in the council gardens, children ran barefoot through the dew. Dragons, great and small, basked in the sunlight, their scales glittering with new-shed skin. Silverwing's grandchildren, their wings broad and their cries playful, chased each other around the fountains. One bold little girl, a Northman's daughter with her mother's gray eyes and a stubborn streak that would have made Arya proud, ran straight beneath the belly of a dozing golden dragon, laughing as the beast rumbled with contentment. By noon, the city was in full celebration. It was the anniversary of the day Jon Snow had first come to Valyria, and the whole city honored it, not as a day of conquest, but as a festival of stories, peace, and open gates. Lanterns were strung from tower to tower, their colored glass casting gems of light onto the streets below. The city's cooks roasted lamb and river fish in the markets, and every garden and plaza echoed with music. From the riverside, the sails of new ships caught the sun. Merchants and pilgrims, envoys and wanderers, all come to Valyria for the promise of something bright and lasting. In the plaza at the foot of the council tower, the city's oldest living dragons, Drogon's last daughter, their presence was more than a spectacle. It was a blessing, a reminder of the pact that had shaped the city since Jon's time. Dragons and people, bound not by fear, but by trust. Children threw garlands of flowers over their necks, the dragons lowering their heads so the smallest could reach, their great eyes patient and wise. Amid the crowd, one boy, no more than 6, pressed a hand to Drogon's daughter's muzzle, whispering words in High Valyrian. The dragon snorted softly, recognizing the old tongue. And the boy's father, a dark-eyed Pentoshi with a limp, watched with pride and awe. That afternoon, in every neighborhood, the festival's true purpose unfolded. Stories. At every corner, elders and travelers took turns recounting tales. Not only of the doom and the long march of exiles, but also of small triumphs, of gardens planted, of arguments won, of lost children found and brought home, of mistakes forgiven, of new families forged from strangers. The tales of Jon Snow were retold in every tongue, each voice adding new detail or lesson. How he had chosen exile to save a world that did not want him. How he'd returned not with vengeance, but with hope. How he'd refused the crown to build something better than thrones. Children listened with wide eyes. Some daydreamed of riding dragons. Some dreamed only of planting orchards or building ships. But all of them believed, in their secret hearts, that the future might be theirs to shape. As dusk fell, the council met again, not behind closed doors, but in the open air of the amphitheater, rebuilt atop the bones of the old. The whole city was welcome. The speeches were short, and the music soon louder than any politics. Meraxes called for a moment of silence, and the people bowed their heads, remembering Jon, Rhaella, Arya, Daenerys, and all the lost and found of Valyria. Then, at the signal, the dragons took flight. Every beast from the oldest matron to the newest hatchling soared above the city, wings carving the twilight sky. The people raised lanterns and candles, holding them high until the city below was a sea of tiny stars, and the dragons above wheeled in slow, graceful arcs, the fire in their bellies glowing like molten gold. That night, Meraxes walked the city in silence, accompanied by the young dragon keeper, Kalira's grandson, and the little girl who'd garlanded the dragons that morning. They visited the tombs beneath the council tower, where Jon, Rhaella, Arya, and their kin rested in peace. The air was sweet with candle smoke, the stone warm from the day's sun. The girl knelt and whispered, "Thank you for the dragons, and for the stories." The dragon keeper nodded, a reverence in his gaze. "Without memory we are nothing. Without hope we are lost." They left a lantern at the tomb's feet, as was the city's custom, and made their way back into the living night. As the seasons turned, Valyria continued to change. More ships arrived each year, and new villages rose on the banks of the rivers and the shores of the smoking sea. The city's schools taught every language of the known world, and its forges, rebuilt with the secrets of Qohor and Loreth, produced steel for plowshares and building, not for war. Every year brought new challenges. One summer, the rains failed, and the council debated how to share the city's water. Another year, a fever swept through the southern quarter, and the healers worked day and night, aided by shipments of willow bark and poppy from the Reach and the north. There were disputes between rival trading companies and rumors of a new alliance of free cities, but always the council held firm. No single voice louder than the chorus, no threat strong enough to return the city to fear. There were still those in the world who looked to Valyria with envy or suspicion. A Pentoshi envoy once pressed for tribute, hoping to test the council's patience. He left empty-handed but unharmed, his letters home full of confused respect. Once, a band of mercenaries crept ashore, thinking to plunder a city grown fat on peace. They vanished without a trace, and it was said afterward that the dragons had simply carried them away, dropping them into the sea unharmed, their weapons melted to useless lumps. The greatest threat, as always, was not war or envy, but memory, the old temptation to rule by fear, to answer suspicion with fire. But Meraxes and her council guarded against it. Each year, at Jon's festival, the city retold not only its victories but its mistakes. The years of hunger, the times when dragons had frightened or harmed, the hard lessons learned in moments of pride or haste. The people forgave, learned, and built again. By the end of Meraxes' life, the city she had helped guide was something no legend could have predicted. The old ruins still stood, preserved and honored. But the living city sprawled beyond them, a tapestry of homes and gardens, towers and markets, schools and libraries. The dragons, never tamed but always trusted, formed part of every household story. Each family claimed kinship with one, their names entered into the city's great book alongside human kin and ancestors. Meraxes, white-haired but unbowed, watched the city's 100th harvest from the high garden where Rhaella had once walked. The children gathered at her feet, listening for one last story. "Remember," she said, her voice clear, "that the heart of Valyria is not dragonfire or stone. It is the people who choose to build, to remember, to hope. So long as you carry these stories, the city will never fall." When she died, her tomb was set beside those of Jon, Rhaella, and Arya. The people mourned, but the city did not falter. The council continued, new voices rising. Old ones remembered. Each spring they gathered in the amphitheater and told the stories anew, of how a bastard became a Dragonlord not by conquest, but by mercy, of how a queen chose to lead not alone, but together, of how a city once broken by fire became a beacon for the world. And so Valyria lived on, its people and dragons, bound by trust and memory. Each new season, another verse in the Song of Hope, another promise kept in the living heart of the world. Autumn swept across Valyria in a tapestry of gold and flame, and the city gleamed beneath the turning leaves as if the world itself honored the memory of fire. The wind that curled around the council tower no longer carried only the sense of ash and old grief, but now mingled with the perfume of ripe pomegranates, late blooming roses, and the spice of distant lands brought by ships from every coast. Above, dragons wheeled in the crisp air, their shadows flickering over new tiled roofs and ancient vine-wreathed ruins, as below, the city's great plazas pulsed with the steady beat of life renewed. On the stone steps outside the amphitheater, a dozen children sat cross-legged, their faces flushed from play. The eldest, a girl with olive skin and the violet eyes of Valyria, held court, her voice ringing clear as she spun the story of how Jon Snow, the bastard who became Dragonlord, had once walked these very streets with a white wolf at his side, and the greatest of all dragons as his shadow. The youngest listened, rapt, as though the walls themselves were leaning in to hear. Not far away, Kalira's grandson, the city's youngest dragon keeper, now tall and confident, was guiding a clutch of new apprentices in the care of two adolescent dragons, whose scales shimmered with hints of emerald and lapis beneath the sunlight. He spoke gently, his lessons a blend of the old Valyrian tongue and the common speech, the words as smooth and steady as the hand he rested on the flank of a fidgety hatchling. The city's magic, he told them, was not only in the dragons, but in the trust they shared, the unbroken chain from Jon and Rhaella to every living soul who called Valyria home. In the high tower, the council gathered once more. The great table, long enough to seat 100, was ringed by new faces and old Braavosi and Northmen, Summer Islanders and Dornish, Qohoric and Marianese, even a pair of aging maesters from Old Town. Above them, sunlight danced through colored glass, splintering into rainbows across the council's sigil. Dragon, rose, and wolf entwined. The new first voice, a quick-witted woman named Sarah, called the meeting to order, her voice carrying with the easy authority of one raised in the city's harmony. She began with the harvest, as she always did. This year had been bountiful. The olive presses full, the granaries near bursting, the fish runs better than in any elder's memory. But there were challenges to meet as well. Refugees from the Western Wars in Lys and Myr had doubled the city's population in a single season, bringing skilled hands but also sharp needs. New wells to dig, new homes to build, new schools and clinics, for the children whose eyes still darted at the sound of dragon wings overhead. The council listened, debated, planned, drawing from the wisdom of their ancestors, but never bound by it. In this, they honored Jon and Arya and Rhaella most truly, not in statues or ritual, but in the living, changing work of peace. Word reached them from the wider world as well. A new king sat on the Iron Throne, young and ambitious, sending courteous letters and careful gifts, but watching, always watching. The free city's embassies had grown, sometimes rivalrous, sometimes merely curious, sometimes hopeful. Bravos and scribes, Volantis its healers, Carth a clutch of scholars and spies. Even the distant Summer Isles sent a prince and his retinue, seeking to learn the secret of Valyria's new harmony. Sarah welcomed them all. She arranged for open forums in the amphitheater, where any might speak, and Dragonlords old and young listened as commoners, tradesmen and children voiced their hopes and worries. The visitors, wary at first, found themselves drawn in by the city's frankness, by the sight of dragons sunning themselves in gardens and the laughter of children unafraid. At the Festival of Lanterns, ships from every corner of the world crowded the river and harbor. The city glittered with colored lights, and the dragons flew low, trailing garlands and ribbons woven by the children. The plaza filled with music, pipes and drums, harps and the thunder of feet. The city's poets, led by a blind bard from Norvos, recited the stories of the year past, of the drought that was turned aside by the wisdom of the council, of the wedding between a dragon keeper and a Bravosi scribe that had united two great houses, of the harvest rescued by the timely arrival of a merchant fleet from Dorne. On the highest terrace of the council tower, the eldest dragons gathered. Silverwing, older now but still radiant, sprawled in the sun beside Ghostflame, whose copper scales gleamed in the last light. The city's youngest, a sky-blue hatchling with mismatched wings, snuggled between them. The sight drew crowds from every quarter. It was said that to touch the tail of a dragon at festival brought luck, and the beasts endured the gentle hands of children with patient dignity. As night fell and the lanterns glowed brighter, Sarah led the people in a moment of remembrance. She spoke not of war or conquest, but of the city's long road from fire to peace. The courage of Jon and Rhaella, the wild hope of Arya, the quiet wisdom of Meraxes, the sacrifices made by countless hands whose names had faded into legend. Tonight, she said, her voice ringing clear, we honor not just what was lost, but what was built from loss. We honor those who chose to share, rather than hoard, to forgive, rather than avenge, to dream together. Valyria endures, not because of dragons, but because we have made our hearts a home for hope. Then, at her signal, the dragons rose, great wings beating the air as they soared above the city. The people lifted their lanterns, thousands of tiny flames rising to meet the dragon's fire, painting the night with shifting patterns of gold and crimson. When the festival ended, Sarah and her fellow counselors walked the streets, talking with their neighbors, listening to the gossip and laughter. A group of new arrivals from Lys performed a play about the city's rebirth, their accents thick but their joy infectious. At a table set beneath the arching boughs of a flowering pear tree, a former sellsword from the Stormlands recited a poem about forgiveness and the quiet dignity of labor. In the marketplace, children from the north and the Reach made friends over sticky honey cakes, swapping tales of snow and sun and dragons' tricks. The world beyond the city never ceased its restlessness. Factions rose and fell in the free cities. The Iron Throne sent another envoy, this one more ambitious, with sharp eyes and sharper words. There were rumors of unrest in distant Yeti, and once a merchant ship arrived carrying sailors ill with a strange fever, forcing the city's healers and council to act swiftly to contain it. Through it all, the city held firm. Each trial, each dispute, was met not with fire or decree, but with dialogue, compassion, and the weight of remembered hardship. When two trading houses quarreled over river rights, the council invited their elders to walk the riverbanks together, to see with their own eyes what was at stake. When a young dragon accidentally set fire to a baker's shop, the city banded together to rebuild it, the dragon's keeper standing beside the baker as both learned from their error. Winter came gently, the city's new orchards bearing fruit, even as the old ruins sparkled with frost. The dragons slept longer in the cool air, curling together in their stone nests. But the people remained busy, preparing for another spring, teaching the city's children to read and cipher, debating matters great and small in the council's chambers and open forums. A new year dawned, and Sira, her hair streaked with gray, rose once more before the council and the people. She spoke of the seasons yet to come, of the children who would inherit a city no longer haunted by the doom, but by the promise of peace. She spoke of dragons who had learned to trust, of people who had learned to forgive, of a world forever changed by the stubborn hope of those who refused to let sorrow be the end of their story. At the end of her speech, she knelt beside a young orphan boy, new to the city, and placed a lantern in his hands. "This," she told him, "is what we pass on. Not gold, not crowns, but the right to dream, to belong, to hope. Carry it and let it burn for others." As dusk deepened and the dragons sang, the city lifted its lights to the sky. In every home and every heart, the story lived on. A story not of kings or tyrants, but of people who chose again and again to build a world worthy of the fire and memory they inherited. So Valyria endured, its heart beating strong, its legends bright and changing, its future shaped by hands unafraid to plant seeds, to forgive, to tell the old stories in new ways. And above it all, the dragons soared. Guardians and kin, their shadows fleeting but their promise everlasting, carrying into each new age the hope that first took root in the ashes. K. 1T. Winter crept over Valyria not as it did in the north. No snowdrifts or howling blizzards, but with mist that settled on the smoking sea, with cold rain that washed the ash from every leaf and stone, with a hush that lay upon the city like the slow drawing of breath. The dragons grew slow and dreamy, sleeping in their warm dens beneath the towers, their scales cold to the touch at dawn. Fires burned bright in every hearth, and the people, descendants of 100 bloodlines, bound not by birth, but by memory, drew closer, sharing warmth, stories, and hope. Inside the council tower, high above the city, Sarah listened to the rain tap the colored glass. She was older now, her hair nearly silver, her bearing still proud but softened by years of leading not as a queen, but as a first voice among many. Her cloak was simple, her hands calloused. She wrote letters to distant rulers herself, in a dozen scripts and languages. She paused now, quill in hand, gazing out over the city as lamplight glimmered on wet tiles, and laughter drifted up from the courtyards below. Across the council table, Kalira's grandson, now the city's chief dragon keeper, grizzled and broad-shouldered, laid out his latest report. Silverwing's brood grows restless. They'll wake soon for spring. The river runs higher than ever. Good for the watermills, but we should clear the lower docks before the melt from the mountains comes. Nan? They see. So, a Westerosi counselor, Lady Mael, kin to House Mormont, added her concerns. The fever from the last merchant ship is gone, but hungers come with the rain. We'll need more hands to plant and mend the dikes. The refugees from Lys are strong, eager to prove their worth. A summer islander, Prince M'Baku, nodded. Let us put them with my people. They know how to coax food from salt marsh and sand. Sarera made notes, her mind turning. And in the west? Word from Westeros. Peace holds, said Lady Mael, though the Iron Throne grows more curious by the year. Their last envoy left with a letter and a dragon scale, a gift for their king's young daughter. Sansa of the North sends grain and thanks. And now, the council moved from problem to problem. River rights, harvests, festivals, the rebuilding of a collapsed bridge, the question of whether to allow a temple to the new god brought by sailors from the Jade Sea. Every voice was heard. Every decision weighed. The work of peace, Sarah knew, was as endless and sacred as tending fire. Afterward, she wandered the city, hood up against the rain. She visited the baker's whose shop had burned 2 years before. He offered her a honey cake and smiled as his son swept flour and ashes together. She stopped at the river school, where children learned the old tales in a dozen tongues. She watched as Kalira's grandson led a lesson with a nervous clutch of children and 3 sleepy hatchlings, their wings fluttering as they huddled close to the warm stones. In a quiet corner of the gardens, Sarah found the little orphan boy to whom she'd once given a lantern. He was older now, strong and quick, his eyes alive with mischief and curiosity. He had found his own place among the city's keepers, those who swept the towers, tended the fires, watched over the dragons and the bones of memory. She watched as he taught younger children to feed the dragons, his patience a gentle echo of the kindness that had first welcomed him. That evening, as the rain slackened, Sarah joined the people for the winter festival in the amphitheater. Lanterns lined every step, their lights flickering in the damp air. Food was shared. Spiced wine, roasted fowl, stews thick with barley and river fish. The storytellers took the stage, weaving tales of the city's birth and rebirth, of Jon Snow and Rhaella, Arya's journeys, Merax's wisdom, of old feuds settled and mistakes forgiven. The children sat wide-eyed, clapping and laughing, their shadows dancing among the dragons that watched from the tiers above. As the festival reached its height, the people sang the Song of Hope. New verses each year, composed by the children, celebrating the peace they had built together. From firestone and broken things, we made a hearth. We made a home. Dragons guard our dreams by night. We rise together, not alone. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She remembered Arya's laughter in the snow, the wild flight of Drogon over the smoking sea. The first time she herself had stood before the council as a trembling girl. She remembered loss and sorrow, and how, again and again, the city had chosen hope. After the singing, the youngest children filed to the tombs beneath the council tower. Each left a candle or lantern on the stones, whispering the names of those gone before. Jon.I. Rhaella.D. Arya. Meraxes. Even the names of dragons, Drogon, Silverwing, Ghostflame, echoed softly. It was a ritual as old as memory now, to thank the dead for peace, to promise to keep it alive. Winter deepened, and the work of living continued. The dragons woke slowly, yawning and stretching, their wings shaking snowmelt from the tiles. When hunger threatened, the city's people shared what they had. When a fever reappeared, every healer worked without rest, and every neighbor brought food and blankets to the sick. When a ship from Old Town brought word of a plague in the west, the council gathered to plan, debating late into the night, but always with voices calm, never raised in anger. That spring the river flooded, washing over the lower fields and sending whole flocks of birds wheeling above the water. The people built new dikes, planting willow and rush, laughing as the children splashed in the rising pools. They rebuilt the broken bridge, stone by stone, each block carved with a symbol or a name, a living record of the hands that shaped it. A new challenge came when a young dragon, not yet fully grown, fled the city, wild and frightened. It vanished into the smoking sea, sparking old fears in some, excitement in others. Kalira's grandson led a search, on foot, by boat, even astride dragons. They found the creature weeks later, curled on an island, its wing torn and eyes full of pain. They brought it home with gentle words and careful hands, and the city cheered its return, understanding now that even dragons needed care and forgiveness. As summer approached, ships arrived from distant lands. Ashai, the Summer Isles, even Sothorios. Some came for trade, some for learning, some to witness the city of peace and dragons. The council welcomed them all, sharing what they knew and asking only respect in return. The River School produced its first great scholars, children born of many bloods and creeds. They wrote histories in Valyrian and the common tongue, composed new songs, forged new friendships and marriages. Some traveled the world and returned with news and gifts. Others stayed, building lives in the city that had been forged from the ashes of grief. On the longest day of summer, the city held its greatest festival. Every home hung banners and lanterns, every street echoed with laughter and music. Dragons soared above, weaving patterns in the sky, their shadows a dance of memory and promise. The children performed a play in the amphitheater, retelling the city's story, its losses, its victories, its hope. At the play's end, they lifted a single lantern high and let it rise above the city, a beacon for all to see. Sarah, sitting with Kalira's grandson, watched with quiet pride. "They have built something that will last," she said. He nodded, his voice gruff but full of warmth. "And they will remember how they did it." Night came, soft and golden. The dragons circled in the sky, their fire gentle, their hearts at peace. The city slept, a hush of gratitude upon every roof and tower. As the years unfolded, Valyria endured every season and every sorrow. Famine and flood, war and peace, joy and loss, all came and went. The council changed, grew, passed from hand to hand, never ruled by fear or pride, but always by the memory of what had been won and what could yet be lost. Children grew to adults, old faces faded, new ones shone. The dragons lived and died and were born again, always part of the city, never above it. Stories grew, richer each year, woven into the very fabric of the city's stones. And beneath the council tower, the tombs glowed softly with the light of lanterns. The memory of Jon Snow, Rhaella, Arya, Meraxes, Sarah, and all those whose dreams had carried the city from fire to peace. So the Song of Valyria continued, not an ending, but a promise. Renewed in every season, carried in every heart, as dragons soared above a city that had chosen, again and again, the hard and lasting path of hope.